Good evening, I'm Colin Turnbull, Director of Hawthorn Housing Co-op, and I'm here with Helen Graham and Robert Stewart. Helen's the Chair of the Co-op and Robert's Chair of our Audit Subcommittee, and they're here to offer me some moral support, hopefully. But just to say, they put in a tremendous, all our committee members, they put in a massive amount of time to make sure it stays a nice place to live. Anyway, I'm going to be looking at housing co-ops, their history, particularly in Glasgow. I'll outline what I think some of the causes are of the housing crisis and the role that I think housing co-ops could perform to deal with these crises. Okay, so Hawthorn is a small, fully mutual co-op. We've got 364 houses. We're in Postle Park, just up the road. As a co-op, all the houses are owned collectively by all the tenants. Although we're small, we do have big ambitions for our community. We've just completed 48 houses, and we helped set up Postle Park People's Trust, which has just received a £1.5 million grant from the Scottish Government. We've got 14 committee members, all tenants, and so it's tenants who completely run the co-op. It has transformed the community over the last 30 years, making a really nice place to live. It's always been a strong, supportive community, but it's now also a very diverse community, a large number of Nigerian families and Chinese families. I think the photographs here show quite clearly why the co-op was formed. The housing conditions in the 80s were absolutely horrendous. But interestingly, the community didn't campaign to get the council to improve them. They had the bravery and the ambition to take on ownership and responsibility of the houses for themselves. That's us right in the top right-hand corner, completely surrounded by derelict land. Now we've got a thriving, active community. Providing good quality housing homes is still the top priority for the co-op, and every house has been either built or massively improved in the last 30 years. But we've still retained our campaigning edge and supporting the community in its struggles. The photo shows a recent public meeting where the community was campaigning against the proposed land use adjacent to us. There is a long tradition of cooperation in North Glasgow. Cowlairs Cooperative Society was one of the biggest in the world, and virtually every family in Postle Park had a member. So people had a real experience of the cooperative as a way to collectively improve their quality of life. It wasn't some kind of abstract theory for local people. Community-controlled housing really came to the fore in Glasgow in the 70s and 80s, and that was due to failures in the housing system that's already been spoken about. They were set up, housing associations and co-ops were set up to renovate old tenements in disrepair and then to take on council estates for improvement. And at that time, there was a kind of general belief in the benefits of community ownership. Community-controlled housing is always recognised that having a good quality, fulfilling life is much more than just having a nice house. At Hawthorn, we do a lot to try and create a place or community where people want to live. We provide a lot of support for vulnerable tenants. We organise activities, and we try to provide nice things in there, like those planters, because that's a powerful statement of what it's like to live in that area. In Britain, since the 80s, there's been virtually a political consensus that people want to own their own home, but there's evidence elsewhere shows that community ownership can be good, and you don't have to own your own home to be proud of your home and your community. In Switzerland, 60% of houses are rented, and in Poland, 27% are rented from a co-op. In Britain, there has been a massive shift to privatisation over the last half-century. I think the table shows quite clearly the extent of privatisation of housing in Glasgow. But it's important to say that this shift is man-made. It wasn't inevitable, and it was driven by ideology and the belief in creating a property-owning democracy. We could have chosen a public policy to promote other forms of housing. It's important we learn from the lessons from the past, particularly the mistakes. And I think this fixation with private ownership has been a mistake. Since the 70s, UK housing policy has been directed to promoting owner occupation and more recently private renting. It's founded on the assumption that your home should generate profit and increase in value. This fixation has led to a number of problems. Firstly, the ideological view that social tenants should have the right to buy their home has reintroduced mixed tenure in blocks of flats and brought back the problem with common repairs. And many of the houses bought back, as we've heard, are now privately rented on a much higher rent. In London, 42% of houses bought are now privately rented. Also, we're creating cities where settled residents, particularly families, are being driven out because Airbnb and HMOs generate more income. Social housing is increasingly getting marginalised under UK policy with the pressure to be providing only for those in the greatest housing need. But how does that help us create balanced, stable communities? This long-term shift to individualism affects all public services and has created private wealth, public squalor, and has been accelerated through austerity. This has the greatest impact on communities like Postle Park, which have the greatest need. Historically, we paid rates and taxes to enable services and facilities to be provided for the social good, and this meant there was a real distribution of income from welfare areas to provide a greater equality of opportunity and social inclusion. These are provided by the state or the council because the market wouldn't do it because they didn't generate a profit. Now, essential support services that are absolutely critical for communities are often provided through short-term funding. It has to be competitively won year on year. But these areas that have declined over 40 years have deep, complex issues like Postle Park, and they require long-term strategic solutions to resolve these problems. Social housing, preventing the housing crisis, I think, requires social housing with some community control, a holistic approach to build sustainable communities by investing in public facilities. We should provide nice and attractive things because it says that peoples and communities are valued and deserve to have nice things in their life. And we don't have to look too far to see how this would look. We've done it here. These houses were built by Mullendiner Park Housing Association around about year 2000 on the Gallowgate. High density, but affordable rents and good quality. And so it wasn't just about providing the most cost-effective, cheapest housing, but houses that are actually nice to live in. Addressing the housing crisis needs a shift of mindset, viewing housing as a human right, not a commodity. It also needs long-term strategic funding to enable us to create stable, sustainable communities with the facilities that they need. It should be socially owned, recognising that addressing need is much more important than increasing property values and rents. Finally, I think there is a role for co-ops in this. Housing is one of the few remaining areas where people can improve their quality of life through collective action. The root of the crisis, I believe, is that the pendulum has swung much too far towards profit, and we need to strengthen the collective aspect of life to create sustainable communities and homes where people want to live but also can afford to live. Thank you.